Hey everyone, and welcome to our Rethink panel on the topic of digital transformation overnight. My name is Allison Lindland, and I am the SVP of Strategy at Movable Inc. I'm thrilled to be coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York, from the corner of my home office. Today, we'll be talking to you with two marketing leaders from two very different organizations about how they responded to the unprecedented challenges to their businesses. We're going to hear about the challenges, the quick decisions, and the very human side of what it took to thrive throughout those tumultuous times. First, let's do intros. We have Michelle DeVore, VP of Customer Experience at European Wax Center. Hey, Michelle.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I have been at European Wax Center for since November of 2019, so coming up on a year. My background really, though, is in high growth digital transformation. So I've been a couple of smaller kind of startup sort of companies and in 100-year-old startup, so to speak. But prior to that, I spent the lion's share of my career at Neiman Marcus, working on the lostcall.com site as well as neimanmarcus.com.
Amazing. We love Neiman Marcus, but what a busy first year you have had in role, Michelle. So excited to dig into that a little bit. Next up, we have Wes Elba, CRM product lead from Michaels. And Wes is a longtime MoveLink client. Wes, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Allison. So I've been with Michaels for a little over a year now. Previous to Michaels, I was at Hilton for a little over 5 years. So, I've been in the CRM email space for about 7 years. So, and very familiar with Movable Ink.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to hear about your new role and the adventures you had at Michaels over the past 8 months today. All right, so jumping in, both of your companies are pretty synonymous with in-person experiences. And certainly when I think about the EWS on Montague Street in Brooklyn Heights or the Michaels just a few blocks away on Atlantic Avenue, I have always been loyal to both in person. So can you both speak to how much in-person versus e-commerce has meant to the businesses prior to March? Michelle, can you go first?
Yeah, so I mean, European Wax Center is the leader in out-of-home waxing, and so it's really you come to our center to be serviced, and so I would say, despite we had a really great online booking and mobile app booking experience that you could do digitally. 95% of the experience was in center, right? And we also have retail products that we sell in center, but again, they're only available in center.
Sure.
I'll say also, we knew and know that e-commerce was something we wanted to dip our toe into and bring to our guests. And so, it was on the roadmap, just wasn't right there. Yeah.
Sure. And Wes, obviously, I go to Michael's probably twice a week to buy my slime supplies and glue sticks. What was the split between e-commerce and in-person for you?
Yeah, so our customer definitely prefers to be in store. We're at 95% in-store sales versus 5% just e-com. So, when you think about projects and something you're making, it's a very physical experience. So, our customer likes to touch and feel and be able to see that product in person when they're shopping.
Sure. So that's a pretty stark sort of situation to depart from in terms of having to go to a landscape where there was no in-person. So Michelle, can you take us through what happened when COVID struck in March and how you pivoted overnight?
Yeah. Gosh, it was crazy. I mean, do we really want to go back there? No. So we have a network of almost 800 centers. And through the course of about 2 weeks on a rolling basis, based on state and local guidelines, they all closed.
Wow.
And so that was pretty impactful. We also had some team members that, in terms of staffing and resourcing, we had furloughs, so that we had reduced headcount in corporate. And we knew that, as I mentioned earlier, that e-commerce was something that we wanted to offer in 2020. It was really on our Q4 sort of roadmap, but we needed to speed that up a bit. So,
sure. Yeah.
So our guests were wanting product, wanting some way to manage their skincare and their personal care routine outside of being able to go to a center. And so, actually, through a connection that our CXO had through his kids lacrosse team, their coach on the team, or one of the coaches, has a small fulfillment and marketing agency called Catalyst up in the Argyle area. and they were chatting at one of the games about what was going on, and said, hey, guy, I think we can help you. So we were able to work with them. We had already moved our main website to Shopify in the earlier part of the year as part of that step towards transformation towards e-commerce. But they were able to spin up a separate Shopify URL for us so that we didn't have to worry about integrating with a lot of our existing systems. And in a matter of about 3 weeks, we had a site live ready to go with e-commerce product. Now, about a week and a half of that was shipping the product from our main warehouse where we hold all of it to send to center. So we probably could have gone a little quicker if we hadn't had to ship the products, but we were, it was a busy time for sure.
Still incredibly fast.
Yes.
Yeah. And you also made an ESP transition during this period?
Yes. So we had been on Salesforce Marketing Cloud and we had completed an RFP and went ahead and moved over to Klaviyo ESP. We were really pleased with their customer data platform capabilities and our ability to integrate with Shopify with that tool.
That's awesome. But where were you in March with that transition?
So we had just finished the RFP and chosen the partner. And so we had to push through the contract and were able to get that launched in about 2 or 3 weeks as well. When I say we, it was me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was me. My team was
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, this really goes to show what's possible when there are no alternatives and, what you can do with an incredibly lean organization. And also, how well built these tools are. I mean, I have no doubt that you could learn the most complex tool ever, but, Klaviyo, I'm sure, was happy to train and support you. And it's also, they're making it really easy for you to use it and get started. And that Shopify integration is really key for them. So that no code mindset and interoperability is just really, really key. But these are, go-to-market times that you would just never hear about in large enterprise software, even 3 to 5 years ago. So it's really astounding. Yeah.
And when you think about, going live that quickly, we certainly had to make some, let some things go. We knew it wasn't going to be perfect. Our packaging that we went to market with was off the shelf packaging that we could, put together based on what was available and worked from a price standpoint. So it's not where the packaging will be when we're,
of course,
fully launched, right? But we had to do what we could do quickly.
But I think also that customers kind of have, certainly an understanding that companies are figuring this out in real time. And there's something really humanizing about that kind of earns some loyalty. Do you know that a really human email saying that shipping has been delayed and we're so sorry. And, we're all working from home too. It does a lot to really engender so much more NPS than, a kind of opaque system generated note that just doesn't even acknowledge that. So, I don't think anybody didn't know that you guys were pivoting and figuring this all out in real time. That's not a secret. There's something really very endearing about watching big companies figure this out because it's all done by people, that's not a secret. So Wes, I, obviously I've probably never crafted more in my life than when I was homeschooling. So Michael's shifting to online was probably a major saving grace to millions of parents and working parents. So talk about that transformation.
Yeah. So, shifting from 95% in-store to, 100% e-com, it's a scary thought. So, whenever we're kind of presented with that task, I think we had already known that previously our email channel was the biggest driver of our e-com visits and sales. So we knew that right off the back, that email was going to be a huge part in that transition to e-com. So whenever that happened, we realized, we also lost resources. So, we lost some contractor resources that were development and design. So that also limited us, and kind of presented some more challenges. So we had to quickly figure out not only how can we drive more, sales and visits to our e-com through email, but how do we do that with less resources? So, whenever we were presented with that, it's okay, well, we need to build in more efficiency to our program, to our operations, And we also need to build in more personalization to our email campaigns because we send a lot of email. We're a very high volume emailer. We send 2 a day to our entire base. So we knew that that was always part of the roadmap was to optimize and personalize those email campaigns, but this just made it an even bigger priority overnight. So what was probably a year-long project or timeline to making this slow gradual transition to dynamic capability within email and personalizing became very much an overnight project. So that's where the Movable Ink platform really helped us was in both of those areas, being able to implement personalization. We were actually able to procure the Stories platform. So that allowed us to be able to inject behavioral retargeting into our emails and just build out different kind of dynamic capabilities around that to help drive. We knew that was going to be a big driver of traffic for e-com. And then, just using some of the other capabilities like being able to scrape content from our website to be able to just quickly inject, content that already lived on our website, like for projects and DIYs and stuff like that. So
you mentioned being down resources and dev resources, and obviously, Movable Ink is one of those no-code solutions as well. Can you just talk about how important that was to getting these projects off the ground in this time?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely something we needed at the time. So it definitely came in clutch. It was great to be able to build new functionality for our emails using data and different content sources to be able to gain those efficiencies and add personalization without any development resources on our side having to do anything. So being a no-code environment, you guys were able to help us build out all of this functionality within your platform, and then it's just a simple copy paste into our emails, and it made it really easy for us to be able to implement new functionality really quickly.
That's awesome. And beyond just stories and then the automation piece, I know you guys also did some personalization using some internal models. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So we not only wanted to gain efficiency and kind of inject some of this behavioral stuff, but just kind of some of the normal everyday content of our emails. We knew it was always part of our roadmap to personalize that content more. So we already had some models built in-house by our data science team that would help us identify what type of shopper you were, what categories you were interested in as a customer. So Allison, if you have kids and you're always shopping kids supplies and crafts and organization, then we want to show you that content in your emails instead of, maybe a jewelry making email. If you're not into making jewelry, you're into, doing crafts with your kids and doing homeschooling right now. So, we identified that as something that was really important during this time that would help optimize our email program. It was all about optimizing the program to be able to drive more traffic on the e-com. So
that's amazing.
That really helped there.
No, it's really incredible to hear. So Wes talked about email being the number one driver to e-com. Michelle, can you talk about what role email played for you guys throughout all of this?
Yeah, it honestly was the linchpin of keeping the guest relationship going. Without the email program, we didn't have money to run paid media, right? Not to mention, it really wasn't the time to do paid media. All of our content and things seems a bit irrelevant at the time with all the crazy going on. But it allowed us to stay connected with our guests and let them know when we had closed and what was going on, to let them know about our new e-commerce experience that we had not told them about before. And then when you think about reopening, and when we were getting centers open, it allowed us to communicate our hygiene protocols and what we were doing to keep our guests safe. But then also make sure as soon as a center was opened in for a guest who had been to that center before, we could target them with an email that says your center at this location is open and taking reservations. And so I think that it was really, we stayed connected with the guests. We went tactically from sending once a month to just sort of announce our larger monthly incentives and promotions to once a week. And, besides that, we were able to inject not just about opens, closures, hygiene, and that sort of thing, but the storytelling about caring for one's skin and the expertise that we have in the space. Really, it gave us another channel to tell that story. And it's been really interesting how I think more familiar guests become with our products. We actually have seen a higher product attachment rate in our opened than we were seeing before. So when you think about e-commerce and the power of that, there's always concern about cannibalization. And I think what we've seen is that staying connected with the guests and communicating with them about what they can do to up their personal care routine has only benefited the centers once they've reopened as well in terms of product sales in person.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And the open rates are, continuing to stay steady. And now are you guys thinking about what you're doing with this site, which I know you said is on a different domain?
Yes. So we have seen really consistent engagement. Things leveled off a bit once most of our centers reopened, but we still have a steady stream of business, which is really exciting. Our next goal is to take so that it's not a separate URL and bring that into our main URL. But I think, when Wes was talking about like the roadmap for guests and personalization with email, for us, because our guests go in center and our products really complete the service, we want the booking experience and the product shopping experience to be integrated so that as I'm booking a facial wax and there's a product that's really great to do aftercare or to make that pre-wax experience better, we can put those two together. So that's our goal for 2020, we're laying the foundation. In 21, we hope to go live with that more integrated experience.
I mean, given everything you accomplished in the past 8 months, that feels like very doable.
We have more time this time, hopefully.
Exactly. So I think, there's been a lot of industry ink spilled about the topic that some of this innovation was inevitable. It's just sort of pulled it forward pretty aggressively. Wes, can you talk about, some of the innovations that you guys have seen, especially around, like BOPUS in particular?
Yeah, so I mean that's become huge for us during this time. Huge driver of our e-com. It was already a huge driver of our e-com sales previous to this, but now it's even more important. And I think what we saw was a lot of innovation around that during this time. And we for instance, curbside pickup. We were able to roll that out as a company very quickly during this time. And we've seen that be a huge driver of our e-com sales. So we're already thinking about, how do we sustain that growth in the e-com space through that? And how do we kind of tie email into that too? So we're already thinking about, different, dynamic modules that we can use within our email program, like store locators to show people the closest store to them, or bringing in real-time inventory for different products that we're talking about, showing people that this product is available at your store right now, and they can just go and pick it up. So I think that's going to be huge for us going forward, and just being able to build off of some of this e-com momentum that we've
That's great. Yeah, I think in general, retail has seen huge adoption of curbside and even barcode integrated into shopping and this sort of touchless shopping experience and a frictionless shopping, pick your moniker. And would any of this have been really an investment area for 2020 were it not for COVID? Probably not. And consumers love it, and it looks like it's here to stay. So that's definitely been a bright spot. So in our last minute, speaking of bright spots and sort of positive thoughts to take away from this very sort of challenged and hectic 8 months that everyone has had, you guys accomplished really incredible Herculean things in this period, probably more than you could have ever imagined at the beginning of 2020 if you'd have been told what you were going to do. How do you take that and carry it forward and make sure that you guys remember that you are able to onboard these, vendors and do these really complicated things? What can you distill and learn from that going forward? Michelle?
Yeah, I think that, I've in my first year at EWC, it's been a crazy year. And I think that
to say the least,
yes, to say the least, but I come from a retail background, right? So I was like, oh, I'm going to this service company. It shouldn't be as, Black
famous
Friday,
last
Cyber
words.
Monday. No, yeah, right, exactly. But no, but really, I think embracing change and the fact that there was a lot of transition and change happening meant that there was sort of an openness to just keep moving through it and sort of we hadn't settled into our routine yet. So I think embracing that, and then knowing that if you want to go fast, you have to give a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. Everything can't be perfect out of the gate, and that's okay. Don't let perfect be the enemy of great or good. And so I think that's really the mantra going in. It's like, how can we deliver something quickly and then iterate to improve versus waiting till it's perfect before we go live.
Amazing. That's great advice. And Wes, what about you and Michael's?
Yeah, I think for us, it was just making sure that we had the right partners in place. Once we lost resources, to be able to keep moving. And then just also kind of making sure that we're aligned internally on the goal. And, that goal was, to drive more e-com. So luckily, we were able to align internally on that goal, and we had really great partners in you guys to be able to help us through this time. So I think that's really what helped us.
It was absolutely our pleasure. Well, this was an amazing panel. Thank you so much for sharing all of your great work that you guys did. Congratulations on making it through, and cheers to a terrific upcoming holiday season. Excited to see what amazing innovations come next. But thank you again, and thank you for joining us, everyone. We hope you enjoy the rest of Rethink.